I've written 17 feature screenplays for remuneration, on assignment, shall we say. Of those 17, 6 got made. Of those 6, I get screen credit on 5. Of the 5, I get shared screen credit on 3 and sole screen credit on 2. And the reason I like to run that down for people is that is a pretty typical career arc for a working screenwriter. It's not what a lot of people coming into the field think it's going to be. No, basically you end up making your living, and it can be at times a very good living, off of stuff that is never going to get made. Because whether it's made or not, those are financial decisions. Those are business decisions. And your original material you crank out can be very, very good and be a good work sample. But I have a number of scripts that were never made, never optioned, yes, but never made, because they were wrong in their timing for the business at that moment. So that's truly, I think, kind of a glimpse of the true nature of this business. I don't think it's changed too much since then. People need to know that, who are genuinely interested in and fantasize or see the possibility of them becoming screenwriters. They need to buckle down for the long haul, because that's what it is. To trace character growth, you have to, the writer doing it and anybody who wants to understand it, when it works with other writers doing it well in other films, you have to go back to certain basic questions. And the one in Erin Brockovich is, what does Erin want? There is one thing, and that's what you have to, condense it down to. Well, she wants this, she wants happy kids, she wants money, she wants... What does Erin inside, what does she want and need? And you boil that down. That's question number one. This is good in general kind of stuff when you're writing a character, a lead character, heroine or hero, right? You've got to know certain things about what makes them tick. I would offer that what Erin Brockovich wants is to be taken seriously. Everything she does, everything she says, everything she goes back to, it is about being taken seriously. But then she finds out, as she goes along in her story, she's getting closer and closer to actually being taken seriously. It's costing her her family. She's losing her children and her children's connection to her because she doesn't have any time for them anymore. Remember her son, he's really getting kind of twisted out of shape, and he's not happy with mom at all because she's not around anymore. So the hero's journey, emotionally, the inner journey, it always has to be hard. It always has to be difficult. And you have to be able to demonstrate it physically, visibly, to demonstrate it. And so you have to know what they want, and that has to come out, really want, their primary defining want as a human being. And you have to know their wound. Every character that works, and every character who has character growth, ultimately, has this deep inner wound. It usually takes place in the past, before the film begins, but not always. Sometimes in Finding Nemo, Merlin, who is the hero of that movie, the wound happens right at the beginning, when he loses his wife and 999 out of his 1,000 eggs to this barracuda or whatever fish, nasty fish, eats them all up, and this is his tragedy. But the wound then defines that character for the rest of the movie until they are able to move beyond it. The wound is when a person has a wound going that deep, even in reality, let alone in fiction, they tend to insulate themselves and defend themselves by creating this shield between themselves and the world, so nothing that horrible or that painful can ever happen to them again. That's usually when we meet them toward the beginning of the story. This person who is isolated, emotionally isolated behind a shield. And the journey toward character growth is them figuring out that they have to get away from the shield. They have to lay down the shield and face the potential hurt and pain in the world in order to connect with humanity and lead a full life, you know, to connect with Earth again, people, and really live a complete life rather than just be caged up and, you know, and be gone and never have connected with anybody else. And that is what has happened to Erin. She is behind it. Remember, you have the scene. This is still in Act 1, I think it is, and she's got the tiara, and she's doing her speech because she was Miss somebody, Miss Wichita or something like that, right, at some point. And she said that I thought I was going to be somebody. I thought I was going to be able to do something. And then she found out that she was just treated like a dumb broad, opening chain stores, department stores, and they didn't expect anything of her, and they didn't want anything of her. They just wanted her to stand there and look pretty. And that was her wound. She didn't see that. I mean, she originally saw that as her opportunity to break free and, you know, be who she knew she could be. But didn't work. So now, in her life, while she's desperately trying to put food on the table for her kids, she is also desperately seeking a way to get people to take her seriously. And that's a wonderful place to start character growth. It really is. Did you know, for instance, that there are only 4 viable goals in all of narrative screenwriting?
And those
4
goals are, yeah?
Win, stop, escape, or retrieve. So, okay, you've got an idea for a character, your hero or heroine. Great, you've got an idea. And they have, okay, now what is it they want? Well, they've got to have a goal to pursue, right? Well, it has to fall into the category of win, stop, escape, or retrieve. Now, these are big categories, and there are many versions of each one, many permutations of each one. So it's not like it's that cut and dried, but it will appear to a lot of people like that's too cut and dried for me. But the point is this: there's only those 4 because those 4 share something in common. They all provide a visible, physical, 3-dimensional goal for a motion picture that will result in a physical climax and obligatory scene. It precludes the use of internal goals. And that's one of the things people have to get over. An internal goal, that's great, and it is separate from what drives the movie. You need a physical, visible goal. Each one of those 4 goals has a finish line, a visible finish line. And a goal like, well, they want to feel better about themselves. That doesn't work on film. It just doesn't work. There are only 4 emotions. Mad, sad, glad, and scared. You haven't heard that one?
No.
Again, they are, you know, there's a lot of variations between mad, sad, glad, and scared. There's many permutations and dimensions there. But the way they are useful is like this. If you are building, if you're outlining something, a section, a particular section, hero goal sequence, or a particular scene, the thing is, the way you guarantee that it's going to have conflict and change in it, and change is one of the single most important. We could talk about that in a minute too. Change is the power that makes screenplays either work or not work. You got to quantify it, but it can be done wonderfully. That if the hero, lead character, walks, stomps, jumps, falls into a scene, and they are either mad, sad, glad, or scared, by the end of the scene, they have to be one of the others. If they're mad when they show up, they have to be scared when they walk away. Or if they're scared when they show up, they have to be glad when they walk away, because that guarantees dramatic change within the scene. And it's a way of checking yourself, because we read a whole lot of scenes which are just talk. And they're the same, everything is the same at the end as it was at the beginning, and that is not a viable scene for visual storytelling. There are 14 character categories that advance and serve story. Story is a central character, hero or heroine, who undertakes to do something, physically do something, in order to achieve a visible physical goal by the end, kind of stuff. Right? And in that pursuit, there are 14 other character categories who serve as either helpers or hinderers toward that hero. And they are, first of all, the main categories are hero and adversary. Ooh, adversary is much unsung and underappreciated. The adversary is critical, and the point, without conflict, you don't have a story. There is no story without conflict. That's just it, So that adversary is key to the creating of conflict, and so it puts a lot of weight on who the adversary is. So you got hero, adversary. Then there is a mentor, a very wide and delicious category, goes back to Joe Campbell and the assessment of the mythological approach stuff. There's some of those characters. He called the adversary the shapeshifter. That's some more specific usage. Yes, it's adversary. Shapeshifter is somebody who appears one thing on the outside and becomes something else. That is one kind of adversary, but not the only kind. So, and then there's mentor. There's the love interest character. This is interesting, the love interest character. I really go into this in detail for folks. For some, the love interest character brings depth and humanity and helps, augments, and eases character growth forward for the central character. And it is the least used character category of all the grad students who pass through here.
Interesting.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's the character, it gets too close to home. Maybe their experience, in these things, emotional, sensual experience is highly limited or something. What it is, something about it, but that is a key character in stories that work, and you have a romance subplot, that love interest character. Whoa, when it's done well, it's one of the most powerful things you can add to a story. And then there are helper, follower, allies, and a sidekick. Sidekick is another category. Very specific function is played by the sidekick. And others. There is the adversary agent. See, there is one adversary. Adversary can only be one person, human being, or a personified thing, a monster that behaves like a human being and thinks like a human being, but one thing, one human being. But they can also have all kinds of adversary agents running around doing the bidding of the adversary. There's a group of characters called gate guardians, and I would put those people in the gate guardian category. Gate guardian is a character who, this is from Campbell and the mythological structure too. Gate guardian is a character who, when first met by the hero, when first confronted by the hero, stops them, says, "No, you cannot enter here." But once the hero finds a way to outsmart that gate guardian, it's never brute force, it's when they outsmart them and find a way to get around them and continue their journey, after that the gate guardian becomes an ally.
Interesting. Okay.
At first opposes and then assists. And a few more. There's a few more in there too. But the point is, all of these characters, there's only 14 that help you create a plot, that help move a story forward. And any other character that a particular writer wants to plot, I really like this character. They're kind of interesting and peppy and zippy and they talk funny and I like it. if they do not serve the story, if they do not help drive the plot forward, get rid of them, axe them, cut them, lose them, because they have to serve a function. Every time I walk into the class, the first evening, all our classes are evening classes, and in the new class, the first year people there are for the first semester, and I walk in, and they're chattering away and trying to get to know each other and so forth, but they haven't, really had anything to do with me yet. And I walk in. It was always weird and creepy, because as soon as I walk in, deathly silence falls. Everybody's waiting, So I look very austere and serious, and I walk to the whiteboard, and I write on the whiteboard in very, very large letters, "Write badly with pride." And then they laugh. Everybody laughs, and it cuts the ice, and it works that way. And I turn around and I smile and I say, "Yes, but I'm not kidding." For it is of critical importance for writers to permanently give themselves permission to write badly. Writer's block is all about expecting and demanding of oneself perfection. Anything, any word, any sentence, it's got to be great. It's got to be great. No, that way lies writerly death. You do that, you'll end up freezing so solid, you'll never write again. It is exactly the opposite. Writing is a craft. It's a craft, and how do you participate in a craft? It's a craft that's exercised with words, and it is like in I don't know, statuary or something. You start out with a big gooey pile of wet clay, and you start to mush it. You get your hands dirty, you get down in the mud and you mush it and squish it, and then you start making choices about, as you shape it, the pieces you're not going to need, and so forth, and you go from there. But you start out with mess. That's what we do as writers. We start with mess, and then we make choices. First hundreds of choices, and then thousands of choices, and before we're done, tens of thousands of individual choices have been made. But you cannot make choices, and you cannot see what or choose what direction you want your story to go in, or how you want it to develop, unless you have a pile of words on the page. So we have exercises sometimes. Just let's try it. Let's write as badly as we know how. And it's funny, you read them aloud, everybody gets a laugh, and kind of stuff. And what they find out is, even when they are trying to write badly, because that's what we're doing, it's this little exercise, it still comes out funny. It's not bad, in other words. They're funny, they're cute, they're weird, they're quippy. But even writing badly, they're not really writing that badly at all. For a long time, for years, before I became a professor here, while I was still a full-time screenwriter, I was teaching at UCLA Extension Writers Program, which is the largest such writing program in the world, and it's really great. Really good people teach there. And it was a way to get out of the house one night a week, out of my room, out of my office. And I was working with people who were really bright and really talented in various and sundry ways. They, great characters, warm, three-dimensional, super dialogue that just kind of crackles and pops. But when they finally turned in their final project at the end of the quarter, I guess, quarter system there, and I read their scripts, they just laid there. They were flat. The story wasn't happening or going anywhere. They would have 3 or 4 events and then try to stretch that out over 110 pages, or however the whole screenplay would be. And I gave them the books, we read the books, we went over it, the structure over and over, the classic structure, and Joseph Campbell and all of that. And yet when they sat down to write it, it just somehow didn't gel into a concept or command of screen story structure. And screenwriting is screen story structure more than it is anything else, right? So I went looking for, as people do, for patterns. There had to be a way to teach story construction, not to the exclusion of all else, but focus only on finding an objectified way to teach story construction. This is how you build a house. Board one, that kind of stuff. And I looked at, hundreds and hundreds of films. And yes, I began to see a pattern that I hadn't heard anybody talk about before or mention before or hadn't read about before. And then I kind of codified it, put it together as a paradigm, and cleaned up the questions that it raised, kind of stuff. And I kept looking, and I began more and more convinced. And then I set out to prove myself wrong. I mean, this I thought was a real important step. So I went back searching through movies that had been hit movies that had emotionally affected audiences all over the world from pretty far back. I went far back as 1929. Buster Keaton, The General. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was one of his last, if not his last, silent film. It is, something of a masterpiece of the silent era. Same thing. The same beats, the same moment, the same sequences, accomplishing the same stuff. So I codified it and began to teach it in the grad courses. People were rather cynical about such a thing to begin with. But what I found out over a few years of working on codifying it, simplifying it, packaging it in a way that was understandable and useful as a tool, because that's what it is. It's just a tool, and darn good one, useful one too. One by one, I won them all over, and I proved it. Yes, it's true, and it was like an interesting experience for all of us. Because again, it is about discovery. Now, just let me try this, okay, for just a few minutes. One of the single most important aspects of screenwriting, any long-form narrative, even novel writing too, but just screenwriting in particular, is change. Everything in the story must keep changing as it flows. It has to be different 5-10 minutes from now than what the circumstances were previously 10 minutes ago. It has to keep changing. And I came to believe there had to be a pattern of change. And what I discovered was this. This gets a little numeric, but stick with me for this because it's important and I think enormously useful. 3 acts, okay? In a screenplay, you've got 3 acts. First act. In Act 1, I noticed there are 6 sequences following one another that I came to call hero goal sequences. Here's the definition for a hero goal sequence. A hero goal sequence is any 2 to 7 page section of your screenplay in which and through which your hero or heroine pursues one short-term goal, physical short-term goal, only one, as one step toward achieving the overall story goal, right? Just that little piece of it. And at the end of that, 7 or so, nothing is exact, but 7 or so pages, something happened or some discovery is made by this hero that I call fresh news. In other words, they turn up something that was unknown by them and by us, by the audience, about what they are doing, that puts an end to that current single goal and offers up a new short-term physical single goal to be pursued in the next step. And that there are 6 of these hero goal sequences. 6 little individual pursuits of individual specific goals in the entirety of Act 1, and what we call, there's many names for this, plot point 1, there's the first major turning point, that kind of thing. I call it Stunning Surprise 1. When Stunning Surprise 1 happens, which ends Act 1 officially and dramatically, ends Act 1 and kicks the hero forward, tumbling head over heel into Act 2, I call it Stunning Surprise 1 because that it should be, I believe, the emotional impact on both the hero and the audience. It needs to be emotional, and it needs to be impactful, not abstract. That always happens in Hero Goal Sequence 6. Always. And it continues. In the first half of the second act, there are 6 more hero goal sequences. And hero goal sequence number 12 always contains the midpoint sequence. That's a separate discussion. The midpoint is a fascinating part of movies that work, and it's rich and layered with things that go on relative to character growth and relative to the plot being, bumped up to the next level and all. But it always happens in number 12. In the second half of Act 2, there are 6 more. Wonder of wonders. There are 6 more hero goal sequences, and hero goal sequence 18 always contains Stunning Surprise 2. Not 17, not 19, 18 in every movie that works for audiences. In other words, every hit movie that you can analyze because it's doing something right, this is the pattern. And then in Act 3, it's the only act where it can vary, where the numbers can vary. And in Act 3, you have between 2 and 5 hero goal sequences. I don't recommend 5. 5 is, good movies have been made with 5, like As Good as It Gets, which happens to be, one of my favorite romantic comedies, kind of stuff. It has 5 hero goal sequences in a rather extended Act 3. But the audience is getting antsy, and it's time to get out by then. The standard, the average of movies that work is 21 hero goal sequences. 18 for Acts 1 and 2, and then another 3 in Act 3. This is a way, I know it sounds kind of weird and mathematical at this point, but this is a way of quantifying change. It tells you in advance, this must happen in these few pages. It also goes beyond that. I mean, people were asking, well, and what specifically happens in each one of these? Can you nail that down? In a general way, yeah, I do that in the book. I say, well, these things usually happen in hero goal sequence number 4, that kind of stuff. But that's up for grabs and up for people to play with. But structurally, the bones are these 20 to 23 hero goal sequences laid out in this exact way. And they don't change. Number 1, not enough story. Again, it's that old thing. Characters can be wonderful, dialogue can be sparkling and even funny as heck. But if the story lays there just flat as a pancake, that story is not going anywhere. It's a weak story. Number 2 would be passive central character. That has killed more scripts than just about anything I've ever seen. And weak story and passive central character, they go together. They really fit together too. A passive central character is a hero or heroine, the lead down the middle, who doesn't really do anything. And life and the story happen to them. They do not happen to anything or anyone. And that is a one way to put your audience to sleep very, very quickly. Heroes have to be active. The hero is the audience. You build a story so that the hero is, with lots of flaws and everything, fine, yes, make them human, but they have certain qualities, character, of character and of circumstance. They have to be brave. That is absolutely essential. But you can put them in, unfair injury. We care about people who are being unjustly dealt with. They're in a situation of danger. They're funny. They have a sense of humor. That always helps. Loved by other people. There is this kind of list of things you can do to keep characters interesting. That allows us to like them. And once we start seeing the nature of the hero or heroine's major problem and the major impossible task before them, hopefully on about page 6 or 8, we, the audience becomes one person, each of us sitting alone, and we project ourselves, psychologically project ourselves into the hero, and then we're along for the ride. And if that hero doesn't do anything or doesn't want anything, and other people do all this stuff, and all the people that come in, all the secondary characters are the witty, fun, urbane, loquacious, and they're and joking and funny. They're all the funny characters, while basically your central character is more or less wallpaper. It's dead, and that is related to something else, which is the adversary. When that happens in a script, almost always the problem is there is no adversary, or there is no powerful adversary. Adversary is so critical. People need to work on their adversary until it is. The adversary should be the strongest person in the story. When I was coming up, you say, oh, they have to be equal. They have to be equal in power to the hero. No, they have to be much more powerful than the hero. It has to look, for most of the movie, it has to look like the hero has no bloody way of defeating this adversary or surmounting the problems being presented by this adversary. But they do it. They outthink them, and they outtry them and drive, and they can make it happen. And that's a story with great conflict, with a hero who is doing things, who sucks us in emotionally, that we can ride along happily for the journey. And that's how the good ones work. Which that's probably more than 2. I made that 3 or 4. But the third, I think I would say, is getting it out there too soon.
Okay.
That's what destroys most screenplays. It's hard, writing a screenplay, a feature-length screenplay. Heavens, that's hard, really hard. And it's not necessarily all pleasant undertaking. Labor, it hurts. You tear your hair out, you pound your head against the wall, sometimes literally, and but finally you got a draft. Oh God, I did it. Here it is. I'm going to get it out quickly as I can, and that's the time of great danger. You can't just send it out. It is not ready. Guaranteed, it is not ready. Long, long time ago, in a land far away, and I was a struggling screenwriter, and I was cranking out original material. That was my thing. I figured the only way I could make I wasn't, a pusher and a pounder and a yeller, and the only way I was going to make myself inevitable was to keep writing and make myself inevitable through a pile of good to great scripts. And that's pretty much the path I took. And I had a great idea about a war that took place at the very beginning of the Civil War. It was an Alan Pinkerton story. And I pitched it all over town. I had a good agent at the time, pitched it all over. I said, yeah, good story. We don't want it. We don't make, at the moment, the word was, we don't make historical pictures. At that time, they were very expensive. Hey, costumes. Hey, sets, locations, means, a moolah. So I said, fine, and then my agent advised me to move. Okay, fine, now we know, move on. And I said, give me a couple of months, because I'm going to write this anyway. I really like this story. I think this is a really good story, and I want to write it. He said, you're nuts, but okay. So I wrote it, and I really liked it. And we tried it again in script form and, you know, got the same response. Nobody wanted to do it. And I said, okay. But I know in my heart it's a good script. So I put it away. It was, I forget exactly, but 8 or 9 years later, a producer, a very charming, sweet producer by the name, Wendy Deitman was her name. She calls me up and says, you know, Eric, you know that Civil War thing you had? Do you still have that? Is that available? Is it available? She said, could you send that over? At that time, she was working at TNT. I was producing with another, you know, very strong producer at TNT. And at TNT, it was TNT that brought back the epic, the historical epic. That's part of what they were interested. I guess he was interested in, you know, that kind of material or something. So I sent it over, and within, I don't know, 8 or 10 weeks, we had a deal, and within 18 or 20 weeks, they were in pre-production. And it's one of the ones of my originals that got made.
So how did they have a copy of the script again? I'm sorry. You had sent it out, but she wasn't there.
She didn't have a copy.
Yeah.
She only remembered it. She remembered it. She had read the whole script back in the day.
And she was somewhere else?
Yeah, she was somewhere else
okay.
and doing something else. But I guess the point here for screenwriters everywhere is all of your original material has a shelf life. It's not that you give it a shot, everybody says no, and you contemplate suicide, and you put it in the closet and carry on, right? That's not it. The cycles of what they are willing to purchase or option or consider actually making, the cycles keep changing. At one point, nobody would touch a historical epic with a 10-foot pole, and some years later, there was somebody looking for one. And my career, during those years, 23 years, whatever it was, my career as a screenwriter went around 3 times. You know, hot to cold, you know, 3 times, 3 full times. And every single time, when things were cooling down, things sometimes that had nothing to do with me, you know, a project goes bad and you happen to be associated with it, or it had something to do with it, and then it splashes over on you, people cool for a while. Every single time, the way I got back in the game was with a new original screenplay. That's your line of defense. You can't be lazy. You cannot be lazy. You must continually be working on original material.